This is a disgrace. Evelyn Kensington's voice rang through the grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel, silencing the chatter of the high society guests. All eyes turned toward the elegantly dressed older woman, standing stiffly at the center of the room, her expression twisted in outrage. Across from her, standing in a simple but elegant wedding gown, was Isabella Hart, her son William's fiancée. Isabella's hands clenched at her sides, her knuckles turning white, but she kept her head high. "I warned you, William," Evelyn spat, turning to her son, who stood frozen between his mother and his bride-to-be. "I told you this girl is beneath us. She has no class, no background. She's a nobody. And yet you expect our family to welcome her?" A murmur swept through the guests. The Kensingtons were old money, their wealth spanning generations. The idea of William marrying a woman of modest means, someone who had grown up without luxury, was nothing short of scandalous in their circles. William's father, Richard Kensington, shook his head in disapproval. "Son, you could have had any woman in the world. Why her?" Isabella took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew this moment would come. The Kensingtons had tolerated her presence for William's sake, but now, on the eve of their wedding, the truth was spilling out. They despised her. She turned to William, her voice calm but firm. "Is this how your family sees me?" William swallowed hard, his love for Isabella warring with his family's expectations. "I don't care about their opinions, Bella. I love you." But Evelyn laughed coldly. "Love? Do you think love can erase the shame of marrying beneath our status? She's probably after your money, William." At that moment, Isabella finally had enough. She straightened her spine and locked eyes with Evelyn. "If money is all you care about," Isabella said slowly, her voice carrying through the hall, "then maybe it's time I reveal something you don't know about me." The room fell into stunned silence. The Kensingtons exchanged glances, confused. But Isabella's next words would shake their world to its core. A tense silence filled the grand ballroom as all eyes turned to Isabella. The guests, the Kensingtons, and even William stared at her, waiting for her next words. Evelyn scoffed, arms crossed over her designer gown. "What could you possibly reveal that would change anything?" She sneered. "You work in a bookstore, Isabella. You don't even own a car." The guests chuckled, nodding in agreement. But Isabella remained calm. She looked around at the luxurious chandeliers, the golden-trimmed walls, the waitstaff serving expensive champagne, and she smiled. "You think I'm after William's money?" Isabella asked, tilting her head. "That's funny because I could buy this entire hotel and not feel a dent in my wealth." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Evelyn's face twitched in disbelief. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Richard Kensington demanded, his voice laced with skepticism. Isabella took a step forward, her confidence unwavering. "I was raised to be humble," she said. "I never flaunted my wealth because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for my bank account. But since you think I'm beneath you, let me introduce myself properly." She paused for a moment, letting the tension build. "My full name is Isabella Hart. Isabella Hartwell." A collective gasp filled the room. Evelyn's expression twisted in shock. Richard's mouth fell open slightly. "No? That can't be true," Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking. William frowned. "Wait, Hartwell? As in the Hartwell Corporation?" "The same," Isabella confirmed. "My grandfather, Charles Hartwell, built one of the largest private investment firms in the country. After my parents passed away, I inherited everything. So tell me, Mrs. Kensington." Isabella folded her arms, her eyes locked on Evelyn's stunned face. Am I still beneath your family? Evelyn swayed slightly, her hand clutching her pearls. The woman who she had humiliated moments ago was richer than her entire family combined. The guests began whispering, their excitement barely contained. William looked at Isabella with wide eyes. "Bella, why didn't you tell me?" Isabella turned to him, her expression softening. "Because I wanted to know if you loved me, not my money." Evelyn's face turned red with embarrassment. She had just publicly humiliated the heir to one of the wealthiest families in the country. But Isabella wasn't done yet. She took a step closer to Evelyn, her voice low but powerful. "You assumed I was poor just because I don't live extravagantly, but I've met people with far less who have more kindness in their hearts than you ever will." Evelyn flinched, as if she had been slapped. The crowd watched in stunned silence, waiting for the Kensingtons' response. Evelyn's face turned ghostly pale, her lips quivering as she struggled to form words. Richard Kensington, the powerful patriarch of the family, clenched his jaw. The room was silent, except for the hushed whispers spreading like wildfire among the guests. This must be some kind of joke," Evelyn finally stammered. "There's no way you, a girl who works at a bookstore, could be a Hartwell." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "You can call your financial advisor if you need proof," she said coolly. "Hartwell Corporation owns shares in some of the biggest industries in the world. If you don't believe me, I could simply buy out your entire family business tomorrow and put you all out of work." Evelyn visibly swallowed, her usual arrogance replaced by pure panic. Richard's fists tightened at his sides. William was still frozen in place, staring at Isabella with wide, unreadable eyes. "She's bluffing," Richard said firmly. "This is just a desperate attempt to gain our respect." "Actually," a voice interrupted, "she's telling the truth." All heads turned as an older gentleman stepped forward from the crowd, an impeccably dressed man with silver hair and a sharp, commanding presence. "Mr. Calloway?" Richard's voice cracked slightly. The name sent another wave of whispers through the room. Daniel Calloway was a renowned billionaire investor and one of the most influential figures in high society. "I've done business with the Hartwells for years," Calloway continued, glancing at Isabella with a knowing smile. "Her grandfather was one of the smartest men I ever knew, and his granddaughter. Well, let's just say her investment decisions have been impressive, even by my standards." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. The Kensingtons were speechless. Isabella smirked. "Still think I don't belong in your family?" Evelyn looked around in desperation, as if hoping someone would come to her rescue. But no one did. Instead, the guests started murmuring among themselves, their once skeptical expressions shifting into admiration for Isabella. Richard Kensington inhaled sharply. "Why didn't we know about this sooner?" he asked, his voice laced with frustration. "Because I didn't want you to," Isabella replied simply. "I wanted to see who you were before you knew about my wealth, and now I have my answer." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "You deceived us," she accused. Isabella tilted her head. "Did I? Or did you deceive yourselves by assuming my worth based on the size of my wallet?" Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew she had lost. The energy in the ballroom had shifted. Isabella was no longer an outsider being judged. She was the woman who had just put the Kensington family in their place, and they would never forget it. A tense silence filled the room as Isabella's words echoed. The weight of her revelation crushed the Kensingtons' arrogance in an instant, leaving them stunned. Guests whispered among themselves, their judgmental glances now turning toward Evelyn and Richard rather than Isabella. William, standing frozen beside Isabella, finally let out a long breath. His eyes held a mixture of disbelief, admiration, and something deeper, perhaps regret. "So, all this time?" William's voice was barely above a whisper. "You were testing us?" Isabella turned to him, her expression softening. "I wouldn't call it a test, William. I just wanted to know if your family valued me for me. Not for my money, not for my connections, but for the person I am." William's jaw clenched. He turned to his parents. "And you failed that test." His voice, now firm, held an undeniable edge of disappointment. Evelyn's face twisted. "William, don't be naive. She tricked us. She made us believe she was poor. And look how you treated her." William cut in sharply. His piercing gaze shifted to his father. "You humiliated her, insulted her, and degraded her just because you thought she wasn't wealthy enough for us." Richard's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Isabella stepped forward. "William, I never wanted this to turn into a battle between you and your family," she said gently. "But now you know the truth. The question is, where do you stand?" A heavy silence settled in the air. William glanced around the room, his mother's desperate eyes, his father's clenched fists, the guests' expectant stares. And then, finally, his eyes met Isabella's, calm, unwavering, and full of quiet strength. He knew, in that moment, that this was a turning point. William exhaled. "I stand with you." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Evelyn staggered back, as if she had been physically struck. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," William replied. His voice was firm, unwavering. "If this family values wealth over character, then I don't want any part of it." Evelyn looked at Richard, expecting him to step in. But for once, the powerful businessman said nothing. He simply stared at William, his face unreadable. Isabella reached for William's hand, and he took it without hesitation. "Let's go," he said, his voice filled with newfound determination. And with that, William Kensington, the heir to one of the wealthiest families in the country, walked away, hand in hand with the woman he loved, leaving behind the family who had failed him. Isabella turned to William, her eyes searching his for confirmation that they were on the same page. He took her hands in his, nodding with a warm smile that told her everything she needed to know. They didn't need the Kensingtons' approval. They had each other, and that was enough. But before they could leave, matriarch Evelyn Kensington, whose face was still frozen in a mixture of shock and embarrassment, finally found her voice. "You mean to tell me," she said, her tone dangerously low, "that you've been sitting on a fortune while my family, humiliated you?" Isabella straightened, her confidence unwavering. "Yes, and I let you, because I wanted to see who you really were. And now I know." Richard Kensington, William's father, cleared his throat. His arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by desperation. "Isabella, please, let's talk about this. There's no need for such hostility. We're family now." William scoffed. "Were we family when you insulted the woman I love? When you belittled her and tried to make her feel unworthy?" Silence filled the grand dining hall. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "We were misguided. But now that we know the truth, surely we can move past this." Isabella let out a humorless laugh. "Ah, I see. Now that I have money, I'm suddenly good enough? Your opinions change so conveniently, Mrs. Kensington. We were only thinking of William's future." Evelyn tried again. "Surely you can understand that." William pulled Isabella closer. "No, Mother. You were thinking of appearances. of your own selfish pride. And I won't be part of a family that only values people based on their wealth." Richard took a step forward, his hands wringing together. "Now, son, don't be rash. We can work this out." But William had made up his mind. "No, father. You made it clear how you feel about Isabella. And if you can't respect my wife, then you don't deserve to be part of our lives." Evelyn gasped. "You're cutting us off." William didn't hesitate. "Yes, you made that decision when you chose money over love." A heavy silence followed. Evelyn and Richard Kensington exchanged glances, realizing the weight of their actions. But William and Isabella had nothing left to say. Hand in hand, they turned and left the estate, leaving behind the stunned and regretful Kensingtons. A few months later, William and Isabella had their wedding, on their own terms. It was a beautiful, intimate ceremony by the ocean, surrounded by people who truly loved and supported them. As they danced under the stars, William whispered, "I have no regrets." Isabella smiled. "Neither do I." They may have lost the approval of the Kensingtons, but they had gained something far more valuable: love, respect, and a future built on their own terms. And that was worth more than any fortune in the world.